recording. So let's go. Hi and welcome everybody. SUSE QE Tools Workshop on the 28th of July 2023. Today, what I would like to talk with you about is what we accomplished lately with the planned migration of O3, that is OpenQA OpenSUSE org, to a new data center. I would like to share with you what was done, what's still to be done, and also asking you for what is still not working. So what we have there is I referenced the ticket. This is what was guiding our work. Meanwhile, we managed to finish that. So short reminder about the context. We have one saga in our backlog, which is the new and updated QA setup in the new SUSE data centers. What we want to do there is effectively clear out an older data center and going into a new one or new ones, and one of those is what we call Prague 2, and the goal there is to provide public-facing services, which includes OpenQA, OpenSUSE, that new data center. One step of that, which was planned, is the migration of O3 to Prague 2. I'm saying O3, which includes the web UI, the infrastructure, workers for multiple architectures. But the specific task here was only about the central virtual machine and everything directly linked to that. The official cutover date where we planned to do that was the 19th of July. And this is why we had that in the subject. So as acceptance criteria, what we want to make sure that we have in the end is that, well, O3 should be reachable from the new location for SUSE employees, but also for community members outside SUSE, obviously. It should be possible that this instance, same as before, is able to run multi-machine jobs successfully after the migration. Doesn't mention architecture, so that means like independent of that, same as was possible in before. We can still log in into the machine over SSH from outside the SUSE network, so all the admins from the community or from SUSE, doesn't matter, should still be able to administrate that machine. And also we have an internal SUSE internal monitoring instance, and that one should be able over a proxy be able to monitor that instance and alert us. So we defined a lot of tasks that we needed to do there, and let me just show you first how it looks, and then we can go a bit more into details what was done to do that. So is OpenQA reachable? Well, yes, it is. And you can see that the web UI is up, and then it's executing tests just fine. And you can see it that in many cases is actually very broad, so there is enough capacity there. If we take a look, then we can see that, let's just pick the first test. It says OpenQA worker 20. Well, I can tell you that this is very same hardware from as in before. We're still running from the old location. So this is, it's the VM on a new location connected to the workers on a geographically distinct, different location. But that is possible, and I can share a little bit more detail how we accomplished to do that. So this works, and this is also, working with like sufficient performance. But what we can also see is that if we take a look at the workers, let me show you all the workers regardless of the state, then we have 377 entries. Sorry, here we have in total 378 entries. There are some stale entries there. For example, you can see that there's a new machine which called itself install, but if you know OpenSUSE, then maybe you know that's like the default host name. So what we did there is that we were so quick to connect it to that instance that we still did it with the old host name. This is why it's saying install and then open worker 24. That one is offline, of course, because we did properly reconnect that with the proper name. We can see that we have currently 267 worker instances online, so that's many. Only 37 are busy, 230 are idle, but there's a lot of headroom there. And let me show you, for example, there's worker 21. Worker 21 is one of the new machines, which is already at the new location. And you can see that marked here is called Prague 2 in the worker class. So if there's a need to separate by location, then it's possible to also select that by worker. What we have is we have those worker classes enabled for production, as you can here, similar to what was possible to execute in before. What we have not enabled yet is the tab worker class, so it has this ticket marker suffix to disable it for production so that it's not picking up multi-machine jobs. The reason is because then without any further selection, like if you would have defined multi-machine tests and haven't specified like a location, then it might try to run those multi-machine jobs with one job in one location and another one in a different location. And while the workers from both locations can connect to the central web UI, the workers do not necessarily know about all the other workers, which would be necessary for them to interconnect for multi-machine. And technically, it's certainly possible, but before we want to go further, so basically I see two different possibilities there. One possibility is to say, well, just disable multi-machine tests in the old location, which we want to decommission some months from now anyway. Just enable it in the new, or build a tunnel, benchmark it properly that it's able to sustain that load. And if that is sustainable and sufficient, then we can enable multi-machine tests spanning multiple locations. Yep, Pavel?
Well, yeah, I was actually wondering about this a lot. That the workers are in Nuremberg and or some workers in Nuremberg and the web UI in Prague. The plan, I believe, is to within, I don't know, 1 to 3 months move everything to Prague, right?
Let's say by the end of this calendar year, there should be nothing that we need to rely anymore on the data center, which we call Nuremberg 1. So yeah, until then, we want to switch off everything. That, of course, means during the next months, we will try to provide all necessary capacities from the new data center.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Nick?
Yeah, maybe to give a little more context, as we were closely working together with SUSE IT on the topic, we focused for now on the new resources. So of course we wanted to have the web UI up and running as fast as possible. In the meantime, we also set up the workers we get there. And now we are basically in the process moving everything over and making sure that it's available from the new location. So that's maybe an explanation why we still have the old machines connected and why it was important for us to focus on the web UI first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
One important point for us, and that was the plan, and I must say it worked out pretty well, is the idea was to say, can we be flexible so that, whatever is ready first, we can make use of. And we had access to the new machine for x86-64 at a new location, and we were able to start an installation there and install systems before the VM was ready. We didn't connect them yet at this time to the old instance, so we used those to connect to the new instance and try it out a bit. Then we moved over the VM, connected the workers from the old location from Nuremberg 1 to Prague 2, that all, of course, you need to, build some bridges or cut some tunnels. But in the end, I'm happy about how that works out, and it shows the flexibility that we have with OpenGA. Of course, there might be
Okay.
certain demands on performance where some things might be too limited because maybe the bandwidth between the two locations is less than within one data center. That's obvious. Yeah, Robert?
Also, maybe one more question, and that's maybe not related only to OpenQA, but to the whole open source infrastructure. If there will be something in Nuremberg, either in the new office or in the data center, if there will be some, I hope that in that case, OpenSUSE will get some like official tunnel from the IT, right? Because I just saw, I was following the tickets we're working on, and when I saw how you did the tunnels, of course it's okay for very temporary solution, but I would expect that in the future there will be some proper connection also
Yes.
for OpenSUSE available,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I can show a little bit more detail from the shell session soon. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Good that you bring that up. All right. So I would like to show you here, like, what is the effect visible to the users? I guess one of the most important user groups is Tumbleweed users, and obviously Tumbleweed relies on OpenK OpenSUSE.org, and therefore it was one important factor for us that how many Tumbleweed snapshots would we miss, or where would we cause some delay. And well, if you just take a close look, then you can find two gaps. One gap is between the snapshot 0718 and 0719, where there was some days between the two. You can see in before that it was like happily building, testing, it like syncing over and testing, and then publishing snapshots every one, maybe up to 2 days. And then there's this unfortunate gap, which was also over the weekend. So I think the big factor was the actual migration of O3, which did not went as efficient as we expected. So it did not exactly work out as planned. But I would say now we are back to a steady state and it looks acceptable again. This is Tumbleweed for x86-64. If you take a look on AH64, then you just see something that looks very similar. The important point is that we have one more recent snapshot. So this is the first post migration snapshot, which was also published. So that also works. PowerPC, well, you can see it was in a dire state as in before. It certainly needs some love, but that didn't change, right? So if we take a look, then we see that the last published snapshot was 29 days ago. It's not catastrophic, but yeah, there was a problem which is unrelated to the migration. Tumbleweed S390, on the other hand, looks like pretty happy. I mean, it has like a very minimal test set, but this is just fine. And we can see that, the last snapshot was way before the migration, 11 days ago, and then 3 days ago. So, why is there no snapshot tested in between? Well, because it doesn't build and isn't published. So that's not really in the domain of O3 itself. So, yep, that works. All right. So, yes, the next thing that I can show is about the tunnels which were mentioned. So the thing is that the build service is not yet migrated, and That means we need to connect to the build service to get new assets, to get the new tumbleweed snapshot. And for that, we need to connect to Nuremberg 1. How that should look like in, let's say, in 1 month from now is that the build service is also in the very same data center in Prague 2. And we have some internal connection between separated networks, so that we have between the O3 DMZ, the demilitarized zone, a separate network. We have one specific connection to what was called in before OBS publish, and that OBS publish is still what we are relying on in this trigger from OBS. So let me take a look there. Yeah, you see those commands, and they call rsync, and the rsync command tries to access a host which is called OBS publish. And that OBS publish, I mean, we did not change that config, because what we did is we told new Ariel how to reach that OBS publish. And we do that over routes, and then the nifty feature is in, let me try to show you. That file, oh no, wait, was it SSH? Oh, no, I think I need to go into a Geeko test. So right in here we have SSH tunnel, and no, we don't have a config file. Is it here then? Oh yeah, okay, there it is. Right, and this is the relevant configuration. What we tried out first is a WireGuard tunnel. The problem with the WireGuard tunnel is that we didn't have all the ports for the UDP transfer that we needed at the time. We should have that now, so we could explore that again. But for now, what was working very stable over the past days, thanks a lot to Fabian Vogt, who did the main work there, is that we are building an SSH tunnel. I honestly didn't know that it was possible. If you're interested, there's the SSH-V option, and the according config option is tunnel. So you might know that you can do something like individual port forwards with SSH, but if you want to provide access to multiple services, then you can build a tunnel. So what we are telling is, we are telling Wicked to build a tunnel. I have config 5. No, network. And so you can see this is setting up a tunnel with a static IP address here, and we have the equivalent configuration on the other side. GeekoTest owns this tunnel, and this is why GeekoTest can also establish that SSH session to what we call now old Ariel. And old Ariel is, well, basically the same connection as in before. And we are building a tunnel device, and we are connecting that in a point-to-point connection. And then we're setting the routes accordingly and the firewall so that one can access the other, which is meant to be temporary. And as soon as we are not relying on any services anymore from Nuremberg 1, then we can also disconnect the tunnel and just use, like, proper internal network. Now, what do we use this tunnel for? Well, we use it so that the commands in before, this rsync commands, are able to access those remote hosts directly over rsync. We use it to reach so far the monitoring instance, to just send some data there. we are also using it to reach the workers on Nuremberg 1, vice versa. And the and the last thing which is provided there is an FTP server, which is used by the S390 jobs. So if we take a look here in S390, then we see, right, text mode. Somewhere in here, it should be possible to see. Yeah, okay, it's not easily readable, but it says install FTP, and then this FTP server pointing to the latest tumbleweed snapshot, which by now isn't synced anymore to the old O3 instance, to the old VM. So this is how we are pointing to that host, which is local in the Nuremberg network, but then it's going through the tunnel to the remote asset directory of O3. One more thing that I would like to show is when I'm going to open QA worker, what? No, not as Geeko test. And I do this, and then I'm looking up the pool server. Then what we see here is that we are still using the local pool server. So why are there two entries? Because oh, sorry, one was, yep. Then sorry, that wasn't enough. Was one line of comment. So we had this old connection, and the new connection is to HTTPS OpenGate OpenSUSE. So we can connect from any worker that can reach OpenGate OpenSUSE org to OpenGate OpenSUSE org over the public HTTPS interface. And this is what's already being done, for example, maintained by Guillaume Cadet for the ARM workers running in the cloud. And they are connecting to OpenGate OpenSUSE org. The challenge is then how to provide tests. Assets is not a problem because the assets are also patched over HTTPS, but tests so far, if they're not Git controlled, meaning let's, you can call it the legacy way of doing that, is still the most efficient for big distributions like OS or Distro OpenSUSE, is to access over rsync. And now what I did is that you can see here on the dates, before we even set up the tunnel, I just said like, well, okay, if it's just about the test, then I can just keep that cron job running on old Ariel, that's the old VM, and it's still syncing locally from there. So it's not exactly syncing the exact state of tests from O3, the new O3 yet. We could change that at any time. It would not really matter. It would just make a difference in regarding which network connection are you using and which is the bandwidth that we're using. Because in any case, I mean, any changes to the tests are maintained in Git, and we're just fetching from Git on each of the side, and we're just using that as a cache. But what we did use in before is the other way around. So if I'm going to worker 22, so what we see there is that when we set up the workers initially, then I said we had the possibility to go both ways. And what we did there is also using, it wasn't a tunnel at this time, but it was a separate SSH connection. So what we are doing there is where we normally supply an rsync URL, we could just tell the worker cache service to use that additional rsync options. So this is an rsync command line argument, and it's telling to use that as a connection command. And it is using SSH on that port with a special key, which we gave for, restricted, limited SSH access to the old instance for a certain purpose. And then we connect it to the old instance using rsync over SSH, and then it could just access the test file. But now we have that new VM running in the same network now, so we can now directly use that as a, let's say, as a more local mirror of the test. And with that, we can also grab class there. Yeah, we see that this is where we made those classes like production, as I stated, not yet tab, because those workers are not interconnected with the old workers and want to make the decision. We want to do that just within Prague2. So much about what was done. Nick, is there anything else you would like to mention what I forgot about what was done?
I think you covered it nicely.
Okay, cool. So let's come to the next point then. What is not done? What is missing? Well, we have actually 10 new servers on the new location. I mentioned worker 21, 22, 24, and those are connected. The others are not set up yet, including new ARM workers. So this should be covered as part of this ticket, but of course we can do that one by one. Also, what isn't what should be set up in Prague2 is bare metal test, and for that we can think about maybe which of the new hardware we want to use, or we are waiting an actual physical move of hardware from Nuremberg 1 to Prague2, but that will come later. So we are looking into solutions for the time being, how we can do that. In the network setup, there were problems discovered regarding IPv6. So that isn't fully working, but let's say that's a really internal thing, how that should work. In the end, if everything is done, as I mentioned, then we want to decommission old Ariel and Nuremberg 1 as soon as we do not need it anymore.
Oliver?
Yep.
Is IPv6 somehow like being more, how to say, it was pretty much ignored, I would say, until now in both, at least in SUSE, and I also believe that in OpenSUSE.
Yeah,
I'm not
it
sure
was
if OpenSUSE
working
machines were
fine
like
in certain areas. It was never fully working in all areas interconnected. I think also in the Prague network,
yes.
it was in many cases not done at all. I know that within Maxdorf in general it was working fine, but then as soon as you're connecting somewhere else, you needed to go different routes.
Exactly. So do I get it right that now the IT people are counting IPv6 as first-class citizen and will enable it and will maintain it? And
well, I would say, as you can see from this ticket, no, we're not treating it as a first-class citizen. Yeah, I would like it to have it like that, but it's prepared. Like, the thing is, commonly you only realize that problem when the DNS entry is already set up. There's an A record and there's a quadruple A record for IPv6, and both exist for hosts. And that means if you do SSH and then some host, and then it takes 10 seconds to connect, well, that's most likely because it tries the quadruple A record revealing the IPv6 address, but it cannot be routed. and then it's falling back to IPv4. So yeah, that's what happens. Okay. But that of course depends also on where the connection is initiated from. So maybe it's not really a problem in the target network. It's like how the IPv6 routes are pushed over OpenVPN, or if you're sitting in the Maxhof, or if you're sitting in Frankencampus network, so all those things. But to have it fully working, that's why I wanted to make that an explicit topic.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to have it. Maybe one day in a year or two we will have it. Thank you.
Okay, good. Yeah, thanks you for all the support. Right. There are other related tasks which are still in the working. For example, PowerPC and S390. For that, we are not buying the new hardware, but we are relying on the existing hardware, which is like, physically being moved. And for that, relying on some external factors. So yeah, for the time being, we are still running those tests from Nuremberg 1, which is not a problem. But eventually also we want to run that from the new data set. Now, that was about what is planned to do. And now over to you. I would like to know what is not working yet. And I would like to make sure that we have all that recorded, that we know about this. So tell me, guys, what have I overlooked? What is not working yet? We'll note it down. Anything that you have observed? What is broken? Missing? Yeah, Alice?
Yes, Oliver, thanks for the introduction. I think it gives... Oh, can you hear me clearly this time?
Unfortunately, not clearly, but it's understandable.
Oh, okay, good. Thanks for the introduction. I think it gives us a very good overview for what has been done and what are not for O3 move. Mike, well, I think you already mentioned that for biomental in O3 is not fully done.
Yes.
May I ask, do you have some rough plan for when it plans to be done?
Yes, thank you. I actually forgot one thing is I mentioned that in the end, what we want to have is we want to run bare metal tests like from Prague 2, right? But that means we need to plan to move according hardware to that new data center. And with this will take, let's say, 2 or 3 more months until this is completed. Of course, we want to have a solution until then. And we still have the hardware in Nuremberg 1, which is reachable, but it's not able to load over the Pixie server. If we've, let's see, maybe we can find, do you know, or can find those jobs? I guess I can find them over the worker.
Yeah, you can search RPMI.
RPMI. All right, there's just those two exactly. So we have the history from those workers, and we can see that this was working 21 days ago. So this is our reference, and we want to go back to that, obviously. And if you take a look, then I guess it should be pretty clear. We have the iPixie boot menu, so that is generally still there, but of course it doesn't have the new content. So the problem is, if we take a look here, then okay, so maybe the error is not exactly clear, but I think the problem is that that's not actually the most recent Tumbleweed snapshot, because it's from the old server, right? So what I would like to see is that we can either make sure that the Pixie server on the old instance has the new data, or that we are actually booting from the new Pixie server in the different. network, which I think in theory is also possible, but I think keeping the assets in sync might be easier. And I guess for the second host, it looks the same. Yeah, it looks the same there. So for that, I expect a solution, let's say, within the next week. So I'm counting on Nick there. We have a ticket. Let's go to the parent. Set up a modern UEFI HTTP boot setup on O3 DNS mask is one thing. This is about having a fully working Pixie usable setup on the new side. That's one thing. And the second thing was I'm sorry if I can't find the ticket immediately, but I know that it's there somewhere with the problem report about it's also mentioned here. So maybe I want to make that a bit more explicit. Yeah. I will take care of that.
Okay, I think if they can be fixed next week, that can be fine. They won't be blocked for long. Okay.
Right.
Another question is, in your plan, in your overall plan, I guess you will you hold on the move of OSD, after you finish the complete setup for O3 really?
Well, there might still be some things for O3 which are not finished until we start with the move of OSD, but that's mostly depending on how people are available and how they want to work on specific tasks. Also, for OpenCase SUSE, we will need to plan for some time, which it takes to sync over data. So, we expect it will take some days to sync data and to keep it in sync. And of course, while a copy process is going on, we can still do some useful work in setting up new machines. So there's a bit of overlap.
Okay, I see. Okay, the last question is, in the new level of Prague 2 or NUE3, are there any new machines that are planned to serve as developmental workers, or only the old machines moved there?
So far the plan is to move the old existing machines there, which are not too old, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But as a plan B, I'm thinking if we can use one of the existing new machines as a bare metal target host, at least temporarily, that might be possible. But we have to think if that fits into the design for the network segmentation, because normally you would split out the IPMI connection into a separate network.
Mm-hmm.
But for the bare metal test, of course, we need it to be within the same network so that the OpenGate test can actually control it. So that would be the limiting factor. It would be a discussion that we need to have with SUSE IT.
Okay, thank you.
All right, cool. So any other points that we have overlooked or questions that you might have? Nothing there, that's a good sign. Then, cool. Then with that, I'm closing this topic. But I would be happy to see you again next week when we are going into more detail about the SUSE QE Tools roadmap. And of course, we will mention some of the tasks that we brought up here and also provide a bit more bigger context. But I'm also happy that we can present some of the things that we have done in the last months, which go further than just the O3 mic. So we also did more things there, and I'm looking forward to see you then. Thank you and goodbye.